we live in such a society of we want everything now. We want the easy fix. We want, just stuff so fast because we've got so much stuff on demand. And that it's a struggle for people to shift that mindset and say, okay, well, Bitcoin, you're building for the future.
All right. So today I have the pleasure of being joined by Jordan Walker on the show. Jordan, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. So I'd love to start, as I do every podcast, at the beginning of your Bitcoin journey. And for each individual, that's different. It could even be something leading up to before the discovery of Bitcoin that kind of helped set the foundation. But I always like to hear personally a bit, what for you kind of defined the start of your Bitcoin journey and how did that get started?
Yeah, no worries. So it started probably around early to mid 2017. And just to caveat all of this, it was crypto to start with.
Yeah.
And I think like most people, it was also number go up. And that's kind of what brought me into the space of looking at, initially it was looking at loads of different coins, but then soon I realized I should not be doing that. So yeah, it brought me in, and it was me and my brother looking into this and actually doing a little bit of learning, but not really, because I obviously didn't do that much research because I didn't realize that Bitcoin was the only one I should be looking at that time. So obviously 2017 there was a huge like run up, but then early 2018 you had a massive crash down, and that's when because I hadn't done the research into it and I hadn't learned about it, that then I just lost interest, and I was like, I'll leave that. And then 2020 is when I kind of got back in and I started to actually learn about this, learn what it was. I was at that point, I was still into a little bit into crypto as well, and but then soon after that, I'd started a podcast, and I was like, all right, I want to learn about this, and I want the experts to come on and tell me about all of this. And so then started a podcast, and we had people on like Jeff Booth, Greg Foss, Larry Lepard, Nat Brunel, James Lavish. They were the 5 like instrumental ones. Then I was like, right, okay. What am I doing looking at cryptocurrency? It is Bitcoin. And then that's what really took me down the rabbit hole. And what the one book that really did it for me was not a Bitcoin book. It was a book called The Fourth Turning. Have you ever read it?
Yeah.
So that was the book that actually I had the aha moment for Bitcoin, even though it's not a Bitcoin book and it doesn't mention Bitcoin. What it allowed me to do was zoom out and actually look back in history and look at the cycles that we were going through, and also to make me realize that it's been so different over history, and what's to say it's going to be very different going forward. Like, the only constant in life is change. So I think that's what really made me realize that, okay, Bitcoin, and actually zooming out and like, what's the one that's going to last the length of time? And of course, it just ended up at Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and I think especially the fourth turning part, because this is a very interesting book, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners believe we're kind of in this fourth turning event in society, if you will, where a lot of things are changing, and we are going to there's so much change, so many new technologies, but when you're reading that book, what specifically for you made you connect the dots between, okay, we're in this kind of big societal change, but how did you connect that to Bitcoin and seeing Bitcoin as kind of the new way forward, if you will?
I think it was coming up because it's like realizing, oh, we're in that fourth turning of like that period of destruction and going into revolution, and I think it's 80 years, the cycles. So that was the really big thing for me, is like, and I could see that happening in the world. That was the big thing, is like, I read about this and I could see it happened in history. It's not to say that it will happen going forward, but I can actually see society is in a very similar situation. So I think that was the real key point for me. And then looking at, okay, well, something's going to change here. There's going to be a reset. Like, we can't keep going down this debt spiral that we're going down. And yeah, the only way out that I could really see was, that's when I deep dived Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I think it's an important thing for people to understand. And I think maybe also touching on your earlier point, because I think for a lot of people, including myself, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I think we actually had a very similar entry into Bitcoin. I was also around 2017, but also more in the crypto, number go up type of, oh, okay, this is interesting. It's getting a lot of hype. Let's see what this is about. And similarly, actually, like you, I got into it, I invested a bit, and then it crashed, and I kind of forgot about it up until really 2020, after COVID happened, when I really started to examine everything that was going on in society and really start to take a deeper look. And that's, I think, when you start to actually learn about Bitcoin and understand what, not just, I'm coming into this hype of crypto, but you actually start to understand the underlying fundamental technology. I think that's when things kind of change. And I'm always interested to hear, people's perspectives on what for you kind of made that click between, because it's still something that, a lot of people who are coming into the space today struggle with. It's like they see Bitcoin, but then they see the shiny object over there, whichever shitcoin it may be. So how do you distinguish to people who are entering the space, what makes Bitcoin uniquely different from all those other currencies?
It's a tricky one for people to get their head around as well. Because in a bull market, typically you'll see these cryptocurrencies going up like lots more than Bitcoin. But that's just in the short term. And it all comes back to zooming out, and also lowering your time preference. And actually, like, that's what really helped me, was looking at the long term. And this is where people struggle, because we live in such a society of, we want everything now. We want the easy fix. We want, just stuff so fast, because we've got so much stuff on demand. And that it's a struggle for people to shift that mindset and say, okay, well, Bitcoin, you're building for the future. And like, I'm thinking, I don't have any kids, but I'm thinking about my potential kids when I'm looking at Bitcoin. And it's not a thing that it will just click and you'll understand straight away, unfortunately. And for a lot of people, they need to go through that realization of cryptocurrency, and maybe why they shouldn't be dabbling in all of these other ones, because at the end of the day, like, one is a decentralized distributed protocol, but if you're saying that to someone who doesn't understand Bitcoin, they would just be like, shut up. I don't know what any of those words mean. So it's trying to dumb it down. And that's what I've been trying to do for the whole time I'm in the space, to make it relatable to people. And like, I use the internet quite a lot as an example of a protocol and how revolutionary it was, and relate that to Bitcoin. And when you look at the internet, it allowed us the transfer of or to communicate around the world. But now, if you look at Bitcoin, it allows us to transfer value around the world. So when people kind of like understand that, oh, okay, the internet is a protocol, I can communicate with people around the world on it, but there's nothing that I can do that with value, with money at the moment, because if you try with normal money, because if you try to send pounds to someone in Australia, it would go through multiple different stages to get there. It would take a long time, and there would be fees involved. I mean, you can put a £10 note from the UK in an envelope, and you can post that. It'll take maybe a week to get there, but then it's valueless in Australia. Like you would then have to exchange it. So when you explain this is like, oh, well, I can send something to Australia and it's got the same value. People perceive it the same. And I can do that for near free. That's when you talk around that sort of level, people it starts to click a little bit for most people, because you don't want to go into the complexities of it. I've tried that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I struggle with as well, because I agree with you. Trying to simplify Bitcoin in a way that is easy for everybody to understand is very difficult, because to play devil's advocate, right? Like the what you were just explaining with Bitcoin is fundamentally true, right? Bitcoin is super easy to send anywhere in the world. I mean, obviously, then you have people who say, yeah, but if you use Bitcoin base chain, then it's going to be expensive and da da da. But obviously, you know that we have things like the Lightning Network and other ways to send it. However, just to play devil's advocate, and obviously, I think we both know the answer to this, but I struggle a lot with people who come into the space and they say, yeah, but with Bitcoin, I can do that, but I could also buy Ethereum, I can also buy XRP, I can also buy whatever coin it is, and I could do the same thing, right? Like I could buy that, I could send it to someone who has an XRP or an Ethereum wallet or whatever it may be, and it's the same thing. So then what distinguishes, or I can buy Litecoin, or I can buy whatever other currency it is. So it's like, I want to understand how you tackle the question of like, yeah, okay, we could do that with Bitcoin, but why can't I do that with Ethereum, or why can't I do that with XRP?
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to, because what we were just talking about there is medium of exchange, and arguably, yeah, a lot of the other cryptocurrencies have that. Maybe not as good as the layers on top of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin base chain, like, it's not great for it to be a global medium of exchange. Like, that just wouldn't work. But when you look at like store of value, like that's the biggest thing. When you come to arguing that point that you're talking about, is that it comes back to the 21 million. And for people to understand the significance of that, but to understand the significance of that, they need to understand what's wrong with the current money. And then it becomes a lesson in what's the problem rather than anything about Bitcoin. It is about, did you know that, I mean, for a lot of people, I still come across people that don't realize that we're off of the gold standard. So older generations, I've had multiple conversations where people think that our money is still tied to gold. So being able to then explain that we used to have this, where our money was tied to gold, and then this all changed in 1971. So then it goes into a little bit of like a history lesson about money, which I really hate myself for having to explain it, because I realize that for people that are not into Bitcoin and or not realized what Bitcoin is yet, and all of this gone down, all of this macroeconomic stuff, it's not exciting. And you need that discipline to actually go and learn it. It's it's a difficult topic to talk about and say that you've got a problem here. But people are starting to see the problem a little bit more, which is good. Because they're seeing the prices rising, inequality rising, the wealth gap rising, so many different problems. But then you need that individual, whoever you're trying to talk to actually want to figure out why. Because if you don't have that, it's a very difficult challenge, and it just sounds like you're preaching, and that I hate that.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it type of thing, where it's like, I think that's something that I also struggle with a bit, because you're right. Like, more and more now, I think people are waking up to the fact that, oh wait, my money, whether it's the dollar, the euro, the pound, the yen, whatever it may be, I can't keep that on a bank or a savings account, because I'm getting crushed by inflation, and I need to invest that. But I think, so that's one thing. But then I think a lot of people don't take the second step to understand, okay, but why is that happening? Shouldn't I just be able to, store my value into something that, government issues, and then I can just put on a bank and it should be safe, and I shouldn't have to, I think it's this whole analogy of like, people have to work for their money, and then they have to work again or take risk again to just preserve their capital and preserve their wealth over time. And I think obviously in some parts of the world, like, I had also Maurizio from Leiden on the show. And he obviously talks
Nice.
about, like, in Venezuela, people don't really have a choice. It's like, okay, well, you're experiencing hyperinflation, so you just immediately, as soon as you get the currency, look for something to store your money in. And I see that also happening, now in parts of Europe and the US, where more people are starting to realize that. Obviously, we don't have hyperinflation yet here, but the more and more that you start to think about it, the more and more likely it is to happen at some point in the future, even in these countries like the US and Europe. So I wonder, in terms of your thoughts, do you think most people are going to be, well, I guess the ideal situation is that through education, most people would buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin, but I fear that it might be more out of necessity that people will start to, because it's like they need to exit the system, and Bitcoin will become more and more clear as kind of like a hedge to do that people will be not forced, but in a way, obliged to buy Bitcoin. So I'm curious on your take in terms of, an adoption perspective, how you see that happening.
Yeah, I think it's also just becoming a little bit, I've seen over the last 2 years, a little bit more mainstream. And just the word Bitcoin has been talked about a little bit more on mainstream media, and that gets people comfortable, a little bit more comfortable with it. And now we're going through that institutional phase of Bitcoin adoption. It's now, people see institutions as credible. Like, people have trusted their bank for decades. That's the whole point of a bank. If you look at the banking adverts, like, if you actually really pay attention to the banking adverts, they're all about trust and loyalty. That's the two things. So whenever you watch it, like, I would be very surprised if a banking advert came up and it didn't have that as the theme. So people have got that as, like, that's the place that they trust. So when those institutions start talking about Bitcoin, and because there's so many banks now that are looking into it, like, you've got Santander, BBVA, like, you name it, there's so many. that really helps the credibility of Bitcoin, and hopefully people then start to learn more about Bitcoin, because obviously if you're getting it through your bank and your bank is custodying it, you don't actually have control of that. That's a whole different thing you need to learn about. But what I was going to say on that topic is, here in the UK, we've got a very risk averse, I would say, population, and the knowledge around investing is actually very limited. And I can't speak for any other country, but this is what I've seen in the UK is we don't have an investing mindset at all. So people don't really understand why you would invest because they see that as risky. And then Bitcoin is still an investment you're making because you're moving money from your pounds into a different currency. So there's one hurdle there, which is just investing in general. You don't have to talk about Bitcoin straight away. It's this is why you should invest. And it comes back to what I was talking about as well, is what's the problem? Because if you can show someone, this is what we do in the Bitcoin Collective with businesses, is if you can show an entrepreneur or just anyone really the devaluation that is happening of their savings account, then they're like, oh, okay, I kind of see the problem. And the stat was, this is off the top of my head, so I'd need to fact check it, but it was between 20 and 30% devaluation of the Great British Pound in the last 5 years. And once you say that to someone, and it's like, oh, I've had my money in a savings account, and they're like, what? So I've lost that purchasing power, because they can see prices going up. And this is where the hurdle we really need to get over, is just investing in general. And then Bitcoin's another hurdle we need to get over as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point you make, and I think it's very true. And I mean, so most of my life I spent in the U.S., but I'm Belgian originally, and there the people are also, I would say, very risk averse. They're very comfortable with doing what they're told, which isn't always a bad thing. But obviously, I think once you start to, I think education is important, and I think understanding, fundamentally, how everything works, how the system works, is important. It's a shame because I think there's two parts. First, I think for me, like I said, when I really started to do a deep dive into Bitcoin was also around the time of, when the COVID pandemic happened, right? And that, for me, the clash of discovering Bitcoin and the COVID pandemic, I think for me was a life-altering event, because I had always been, very normal in the sense that I believed in what the government told me, and believed that they had our best interests in mind, and that, essentially you should follow in line and do what you're told. Obviously, then once I start to learn a bit more about Bitcoin, but also seeing certain dynamics at play during the COVID pandemic and the insane amount of power that governments were able to yield over people and businesses, not just in terms of, shutting everything down, but just an insane amount of control essentially that they had over people. It was really an eye-opening event for me, because it started for the first time in my life for me to really question authority, not in a sense just for the sake of questioning authority, but also because you start to understand and learn more about the system which you're in. And I think, to go back also to this fourth turning, which you were mentioning earlier, I think, also the advent of the internet and things like X and technologies that allow easier spread of information, and for people to understand more fundamentally how things are working. These combining forces, combined with Bitcoin, which is a money that's completely out of the control of the state, and is essentially, fully free for anybody to use in the world. I think these are two very, very powerful forces that are going to, as you mentioned, kind of lead us into this fourth turning. But I'm curious from your perspective, like when you talk to whether it's clients or people, what is still like the biggest pushback that you get? Is it more because I think people are very, I don't know if I want to use the word program, but are taught to believe certain things, right? So, and I think we both know that Bitcoin also kind of forces you to re-question your assumptions and understand fundamentally, what is happening. So I'd love to hear a bit, like kind of what is a feedback that you get from clients or just people in general on when you try to introduce them to Bitcoin.
Yeah, it varies from person to person. Like over the years, it's also changed over the years as well. Like the pushback, and it's whatever the narrative is at that time. So over the past, I want to say maybe like 2021 to 2024, or maybe 2022 to 2024, there was a big environmental narrative around Bitcoin, and people would jump on that. And just because there was a lot of articles and FUDs getting put out there around that angle, so there's a lot of pushback that needed to be done around that. And yeah, shout out to Daniel Batten, who put out some amazing resources that then I could then use to help rebut against that. So that was a strong one, but that's kind of like died away now. I'm not seeing that argument come up very often anymore. So that is good, because that just means people are getting over the education curve of that, and people are realizing, oh, okay, maybe it's not that bad for the environment. Oh, maybe it's actually good. And that's a whole different thing to get your head around, to say that. But then at the moment, there's like a lot of saying it's a Ponzi scheme. That's a common one. But the way I kind of handle it is I don't push back as much, and try and fight back on that narrative as much as possible. And just when people are coming to me and saying this, that, and the other, I will give them the things that I believe would change their mind, and I will give them a little bit of time on why I think they're wrong, but I won't spend hours and hours trying to educate them when they're just clearly just like, that's the argument that they're sticking with. Because I've wasted a lot of time trying to argue back against these narratives, and a majority of the time you just can't. Like, it's set in stone, and like that's their beliefs, and that's okay, because that's where they are at the moment. And everyone in the world has different beliefs as well. So what I tend to do is like I go for like the low hanging fruit, like the people that I think are going to understand it the best and the easiest. Which is why we do a lot of work with entrepreneurs, with founders, business owners, because once you've built a business, a lot of these people have built businesses, they've taken risk, they've done something against the status quo, and they're builders as well. And problem solvers. So if you were then saying you've got a problem, it's a lot easier to be like, okay, well, here's a potential solution to that problem. So yeah, I'm not sure that really answers your question, but there's on you.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it does, because it was also not the easiest question, because like you said, there's different angles for different people. But I do agree that I think you kind of have to pick at the lowest hanging fruit and help people where they are. I'd love to kind of get back a bit also to your your Bitcoin journey, but specifically, you mentioned in the beginning you started the podcast to also meet people in the space to learn more about Bitcoin yourself. At what point along this process did you decide to start Bitcoin Collective, and what was kind of the initial inspiration or motivation there to start Bitcoin Collective?
Yeah, so it started we had a podcast, and on the podcast, we were always talking about America. It was like, America, they're doing this, they're doing that. And we were in the UK, and it was me and my co-host at the time. And we were like, no, nothing's happening here. So on the podcast, we were like, well, should we do a conference? We were looking at over to Miami when they were doing the conference there. And yeah, we were like, well, should we just do a conference? And then we just said it on the podcast. And then after the podcast went out, we had sponsors reach out. And then we're like, okay, well, we've never done anything like this before. It was just an idea. And so then, yeah, we sent a message to those 5 people that I said before, like Jeff, Larry, all of them. And we said, we're thinking of doing a conference in the UK. Would you come if we did it? And they all said yes, and we won't charge you anything. All right. And then we were like, okay, yeah, this is it. And that was like the pivotal moment for the Bitcoin Collective, the formation of it. We looked at doing a conference near where I grew up, in a place called Dundee in Scotland. And it's a city, but it's a small city. And so we're looking there, and we soon realized that this thing was getting bigger than Dundee. So we had to move it to Edinburgh, to the capital, so we could get a bigger venue, and people could fly in, because at this point we were now getting loads of international speakers coming in and flying in. So yeah, we had to build the team out. Had an amazing team help us build that event. And then, yeah, it turned into the UK's first major Bitcoin conference. We had Bitcoiners from all around the world come in. But then I'm very much of, how do we make Bitcoin relatable, and bridge that gap? So of course, like, we had institutions there like Fidelity, Coutts Bank, charities like Charity Water, Save the Children, yeah, just loads of amazing people. And then a member of parliament was on stage speaking as well. So it was like bringing together people to learn about Bitcoin. And the nice thing was, it was in the depth of the bear market. So it was like $17,000 per coin. So people were actually there because they cared about Bitcoin, which was really nice. So yeah, that's how the Bitcoin Collective really started and came to life. Essentially, it was just an idea of, let's do a conference, and then we managed to pull it off in a couple months, because we didn't give ourselves very much time to actually do this.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty impressive, because I think, you acted on the momentum quickly, in terms of, getting the initial interest and getting these important people like you mentioned, those 5 people that you had on early in the podcast as well, to come to the conference. I can imagine putting together something like that at scale is not the easiest in terms of logistics and getting everybody together, and a date and a venue and food and catering and da. So what was that first experience like? Was it, as difficult as you expected? Was it easier than you expected? Or how did that first kind of conference go for you?
Definitely more difficult.
Yeah.
Not easier. I can assure you that. Yeah, we had a brilliant team. That was the good thing. Very organized, and we just managed to bring it together like a really good group of people to put on this event. And it actually turned out to be like one of the best well-organized Bitcoin events around the time. Is a lot of the speakers, because they were going from conference to conference, and a lot of them said like this was like brilliantly organized. And we've managed, because the nice thing was, like, no speaker got paid for it at all. So like we wanted to give back and like really like show our appreciation for them coming. So we'd hired out. So one of our sponsors was Johnny Walker, and we'd hired out the top floor. They've got like an experience in Edinburgh. We'd hired out a whole top floor for like a dinner for all the speakers and everything. And everything went off really without a major hitch. Like there's a lot in the background that people don't see that's happening. Like someone asked me the other day, did I enjoy the conference? And I was like, not really at the time. Because I was running around and I was stressed, and that was one of the first times I'd actually been on stage as well and like presenting to a large crowd. So me, like I was very nervous around that as well. Like since then I've done lots of different appearance, like speaking slots and everything like that. So I've got used to it now, but back then honestly, you should have seen me. I was an absolute wreck.
Yeah, that's normal, I think, right? With that kind of, especially because it's not like you were coming from a specific background in terms of event organizing or even that, you'd been in Bitcoin for tens of years or whatever. So it's impressive that you're able to do that. And I think it says something also about, Bitcoiners in general in the Bitcoin space. The fact that they were, all these speakers, guys like Jeff Booth, James Lavish, were able to go to the conference and not charge you anything. I think that talks a lot about the people who are in the space as well. And even I've had exactly those five. Well, I've had Natalie, I've had Jeff, I've had James on the show. And I wasn't expecting them to really agree to come on because, they have quite big audiences and I'm sure they're very, very busy people. But all three of them, gladly accepted. And it was just a token to me also of, I think Bitcoiners are people who really care about the world and also really care about the message of Bitcoin, right? And just trying to get the message of Bitcoin out in whatever way they think is best and is possible. And I think, it's just a huge testament to Bitcoiners in general.
100%. And it is. It's like, because we're all on like a similar mission of fixing the money essentially. So a lot of people want to give their time to further educate in the best way that they can. And the nice thing is people come from different angles as well. So like I spoke about Daniel Batten earlier, like he comes from the environmental, but then you've also got other people that come from loads of different angles. So it totally is. And it's like, it's just a testament like that. And you can also tell who are the people that are actually in it for Bitcoin, and they'll give their time within reason. Like obviously, like you can't just be giving your time away. It's so valuable. But you can usually tell like who are the people actually in it for that. And because at the conference we had people saying we want tens of thousands to come and speak. And we were just like, no, that's not happening. Sorry. But at the same time, I understand because it is their time that they're giving away.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, it's a true testament to, I think, some of the Bitcoiners in the space and just the broader message. So after you did the conference, Bitcoin Collective has scaled a bit since then. For you, what was that moment that then, because, you started the podcast, you organized this conference. Was it pretty clear for you at that moment, like, okay, this is something, like Bitcoin is something where I really want to not just dedicate my financial time and energy to, but also, your career energy, right? You're dedicating your time on a daily basis to helping Bitcoin grow. And so what was that thought process like for you? Was it pretty clear that this was something that you wanted to devote and dedicate your time to?
Yeah, it became very, very clear. Like once you in that room with everyone, and like I hadn't really met that many people in in Bitcoin before that conference, like I'd never been to a Bitcoin conference before my own, which is quite crazy to think that. And but like once you meet people and like find out like who they are, what they do, like so many interesting people in that room, and I was like, yeah, this is it. I'd it sounds so cringe, but like I'd found like my passion, and also like I like building stuff. I like building business, so like it felt like the right thing, and like I get excited about going to work, and a lot of my friends can't like comprehend that. They're like, what? Like you're working on a Saturday? Why are you doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean it is true, and I feel the same way. I think because I think there's also so much work to be done in Bitcoin. You know, I think we're still. That's what I tell people too. You know, we're still so early in the Bitcoin space in general, and there's so many different avenues, so many different places where Bitcoin can like be improved in the sense that we can help global adoption. You know, and I think that's what's so exciting about it. And I think there's always new things coming out in terms of whether it's new, you know, technologies built on top of Bitcoin, new ways to custody Bitcoin, new, you know, education material, whatever it may be. But I think there's always something to contribute. And so when you had the conference, because Bitcoin Collective is bigger than just conferences, right? So how did you then think about building this into, you know, also a broader business than the conferences?
Yeah, well, we were supposed to have a conference the next year, actually. So 2023. But FTX collapse happened. And that meant that every company who were on board or considering backing another conference, they just pulled. Like every company in the space, I think, just like pulled their marketing budget and was like, we're going into survival mode. So yeah, we didn't put on another large scale one. We've done quite a few smaller ones since then, like with a maximum of like 120 people. So we've done a few of them, but then we've also for a period we did like courses of like educating around Bitcoin, but doing it in like more bite-sized chunks and getting experts from the space to actually come and present these courses. But since then we've pivoted away, because where we are now is like we've got the media side of things. So like the podcast, our Bitcoin Town Hall, which is our spaces, and our newsletter. But then I've been seeing a lot of entrepreneurs and founders and business owners leaving the UK. And you'll see on social media, there's lots of stats around UK is one of the worst for this happening at the moment. But I could see it in real life. That's the painful thing. Is like my friends, people I look up to, they were leaving, and I like living in the UK. I got family here and friends, and I was like, I'm not leaving. And so then that's what sent us down the path of, okay, well, business owners are the ones that have been getting this a lot easier this whole time. This coupled with then you've got the corporate Bitcoin adoption currently happening. So everyone following the Michael Saylor playbook. This has really elevated people to realize, I can actually do this in my business. So this is what we do now. We help UK private business owners learn about Bitcoin. Look at like if you're holding cash for a long period of time on your balance sheet, the implications of that. And then like we'll do education around what Bitcoin actually is. So now, yeah, we're working primarily with UK business owners, and from like smaller, like one person things up to like top tier sports teams. So it ranges massively. But yeah, this is where we've found is like the perfect spot, and it's what I was saying earlier is my passion is Bitcoin, but then building businesses, then it's helping other people implement Bitcoin into their business and like think about a strategy around that. So yeah, it's all come together over the last last maybe 6 months, and yeah, we've pivoted, rebranded with everything. But the nice thing is now we're back in the events game, because the UK landscape hasn't been particularly nice to be putting on Bitcoin events, because Bitcoin businesses haven't really wanted to come to the UK just because of regulation. But now we're seeing things kind of ease up, more Bitcoin businesses wanting to come in, which then really help us on the event side of things. So now, yeah, we're doing our next larger event in November this year, 21st of November, which is with a strong focus on business owners, entrepreneurs. So yeah, it's exciting to get back in the events game, and hopefully they'll just get bigger and bigger from now on.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and I think the focus on businesses, I think, is also very important because, yeah, like you said, I think well, businesses, one, it's kind of much larger scale, but the Michael Saylor thing, right, where he recognized that he was just kind of sitting on a melting ice cube when keeping cash reserves, and it's, yeah, making sure that businesses are aware that Bitcoin is an option to help with their corporate balance sheets. Do you also focus on the actual, like, because I think that there's one pillar around education and understanding, like, okay, what is Bitcoin? Why is it important? Why should I invest? Why should I put my money in there? Whether it's from an individual or a corporate standpoint. Do you also help people with the actual implementation strategy in terms of, like, okay, I now am convinced I want to buy a portion of Bitcoin for my balance sheet? Because I think there's also, depending on where you are, of course, in the world, there's also complications with, especially as a business, buying Bitcoin. Okay, who's going to custody it, or are you going to self-custody it or not? So I'm curious if you also help on the implementation side, or if it's mainly focused around the education and overall awareness part of Bitcoin.
A lot of it is focused around the education side of things, but then we've got partners that help with everything that you're talking about, like from how's it taxed, how's it accounted for, how do you buy it, this, that, and the other. Like the whole thing, we've tried to take the friction out of it all by partnering with the right people along the way, and then giving options to these businesses, because like everyone will want to do it differently. That's the thing. There's no there's no one thing that'll suit everyone, because just from an individual standpoint, from my standpoint, some people, like, I prefer multi-sig than single sig, but that might not suit everyone. And there's so many different things in it. In a business, it just becomes way more complex, because you've also got, potentially there's a board. So how does that work with the custody side of things? And there's a lot of like education that we're doing around that with like boards as well. Is like maybe one person's a Bitcoiner and the rest aren't. So they really want the rest of the boards to understand it. So yeah, we just help like on the education side of things and take the friction out of actually implementing it, because we know a lot of the places to go and the partners that we've got.
Yeah, it makes sense. No, and I think that's a good way to go about it. How do you see the next, like, I think we're in a pretty exciting time for Bitcoin, not just in terms of technological things that are happening in the space, but also I think from a global adoption standpoint, as you discussed, more corporations, more big players coming into the space. How do you see the next like year, 18 months kind of playing out for Bitcoin? What are your thoughts?
A year to 18 months. Um, the size of players that we've got now, I'm very much in the camp of there is going to be a supply shock at some point. Like the amount that's getting eaten up by these corporate treasuries or these public corporate treasury companies. You've got the ETFs as well. Maybe there's more nation states that we don't know about that are doing it, and I think we're just hitting that tipping point of people realizing what Bitcoin actually is. I'm not saying it's going to go mainstream in the next 18 months because this is a really a long-term thing, but I do think that now the major players with the major capital are realizing what this thing actually is. Because at the end of the day, Bitcoin's not changed. It's just the world around it that's changed, and educated themselves on what Bitcoin is. So over the next 18 months, I just think we'll see lots more corporations get involved because that's the narrative for this cycle anyway. It'll be interesting to see what the US do with their strategic Bitcoin reserve. I'd expect some news on that over the next 18 months, whether they will be accumulating or not. And yeah, I just think wider adoption is happening. But then I also do think beyond that, there needs to be more of a focus on the custody of Bitcoin. And because we're going into that age of your banks are now getting involved in this, but of course they want to be custodying your Bitcoin, and institutions as well, the ETFs. So there's going to need a lot of education around. Oh, did you know that it's the same thing as the fiat? Like, did you know that the money in your bank account is not actually yours? It's going to be the same thing with Bitcoin. Did you know that the Bitcoin in your bank account is not actually yours? So I'm preparing for that.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. That's something that I struggle with a bit as well because I think some of the bigger players coming into the space, like making it easier for people to adopt Bitcoin is a win. But I think also there's a limit, right? Like I think obviously ETFs are not Bitcoin, they're an IOU on Bitcoin, but there's no way to validate, the Bitcoin that you have on the blockchain or anything like that. And as you mentioned, now that banks are going to come into the space and start custodying Bitcoin, I fear that I don't want to also go into an era where we have like fractional reserve Bitcoin, where it's like, because the problem is that if you ask most people, I think if you ask a majority of the people today, if they believe that the money in the bank is fully backed, and that they have 100% claim on that, if a bank goes belly up or whatever, like I think people don't understand how actually fractional reserve banking works, even though they have most of their money in a bank. So it's kind of this dichotomy between like, yes, we want global adoption, of course, but at the same time, we don't want to repeat what has happened with, fiat currency where we have this, fractional reserve Bitcoin system. And I think that's why, as you said, self-custody is so important. And I think for me also a focus is how do we get self-custody more accessible to people, because I think that's still a struggle for a lot of people, right? It's like, okay, I want to buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, but then if I want to take self-custody of it, I have to go to a hardware wallet and I have to back up a seed phrase and all this stuff. It's not very useful yet for people, for the main person. So that's also, I think, where there's a lot left to be desired.
Yeah, so true. And it's like, the thing is, you can't ask everyone to go from having no responsibility for their wealth to having full responsibility for their wealth. From being in a bank and they don't really have responsibility over it, and then to like, oh, if I lose these 12 words, then I've lost that. Like you can't expect the world just to quickly transition onto that. Like this whole thing is an evolution, and like I'm quite a piece of that, of like, this will just be a next stage that we're going to, where yes, we probably will have a lot of banks custodying it, but then it's up to people to educate on why you should be holding it, for yourself. And then we've also, the next stage of the evolution is medium of exchange, is actually Bitcoin becoming that global medium of exchange. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried about it, but at the same time, I'm like, this is just a stepping stone, and like by it getting integrated into the normal ways that we do things at the moment, like that really tips it over the main, like the tipping point into the mainstream. And then it's just another battle of, okay, well, this is self-custody. Well, did you know you can transact in it? So yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think there's still a lot of work to do, and that's a good thing. Obviously, I think we want to. That's why I think more and more people in the Bitcoin space is important to help build these solutions to help build the Bitcoin future that we want. And I know we're out of time here, so I have one more question for you that I ask at the end of every podcast, and that is, since we're in a time where we have a lot of new people entering the space, not just Bitcoin, but let's say the broader crypto space, we typically want to get people to Bitcoin, but a lot of people enter like you and I did. So what advice would you have for people entering the space in general as they start, their own journey?
It's a great question. What advice would I have? I think it's the same that I had, is actually zooming out and looking at the bigger picture. I would recommend The Forest Turning and also Ray Dalio. So an easy one, if you're new coming into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, like a good place to start. Like I like sharing short videos to people, and because I can't expect them to go and read The Forest Turning from not knowing anything. So like Ray Dalio does two really great videos. It's like the economics, I can't remember the name, the mechanisms in economics and changing world order are the two ones. And I recommend anyone just to look at them first, and then the book that I recommend to everyone to read is Bitcoin, Hard Money You Can't Fuck With. Just because like it was great for me as well. I'm just giving it from my perspective, because it told Bitcoin through a story, and it didn't go deep into the techie or the details. Like it really helped me like get engaged with Bitcoin without getting bored going through a book, because I wasn't really interested in it by that point. So yeah, that's where I'd start. I'll send you the links to the videos as well, so you can just put it in the show notes.
Perfect. I appreciate that, Jordan. And thanks for coming on my show. Where can my listeners find more about, what you're doing and all the great work you're doing in the Bitcoin space?
Yeah, so I use X and LinkedIn, so you can find me on there, Jordan Walker. Or you can go to our website, which is bitcoincollective.co. And yeah, if you're a UK business as well, please reach out to us and you're interested in looking into Bitcoin within your business, a Bitcoin strategy, then yeah, you can message me, one of the team, or just email us on our website.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I'll include all that in the show notes as well. Jordan, really appreciate the time, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you.